Mark Johnson's car snaked along Malibu's coastal road, the Pacific Ocean shining beside them like an infinite mirror. Emily, her 15-year-old daughter, looked out the window, her eyes wide with admiration at the luxurious mansions that passed by. "Wow, Dad," Emily exclaimed, "these houses are amazing. I can't believe we're going to live in one of them." Mark smiled, his eyes fixed on the road. "Well, we haven't decided anything yet, dear. Let's see this house first and then make a decision." Emily nodded, turning her attention to her cell phone. She quickly typed a message to her best friend, Zoe. "I'm in Malibu. The houses here are insane." Mark watched his daughter from the corner of his eye. He was still surprised by how fast she was growing. It seemed like yesterday that he held her in his arms for the first time, a little baby with curious eyes and dark skin like his. Now she was a smart, determined teenager with dreams as big as the ocean beside them. The GPS announced that they had reached their destination. Mark parked the car in front of an impressive house, all glass and concrete, that seemed to float on the ocean. "Wow," Emily whispered, her eyes wide. "It's even more amazing than in the photos." Mark smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and nervousness. This house represented everything he had worked for in recent years. It was a symbol of his success, proof that he had overcome every barrier that society had placed in his path. They got out of the car and headed towards the entrance of the house. Mark was about to ring the doorbell when his phone rang. He looked at the display and frowned. "It's from the office," he told Emily. "I need to answer this. Why don't you come in and take a look? The realtor should be waiting." Emily nodded, and while Mark answered the call, she opened the door and entered the house. The inside was even more impressive than the outside. Polished marble floors reflected the light streaming in through the huge glass windows. The living room opened onto a deck overlooking the ocean, where an infinity pool seemed to merge with the horizon. Emily was so absorbed in admiring the view that she didn't notice a man approaching until he spoke, his voice cutting like a blade. "Hey, what do you think you're doing here?" Emily turned around in surprise to see a middle-aged man wearing an expensive suit looking at her with an expression of displeasure. "I'm here to see the house," Emily stammered, taken aback by the man's hostility. The man, who Emily assumed was the broker, Peter Collins, narrowed his eyes. "Of course you are," he said, his tone thick with sarcasm. "And I'm Santa Claus. Look, girl, I don't know how you got in here, but you need to leave now." Emily felt her face heat up. "No, you don't understand. My dad and I have a visit scheduled. He's outside on the phone." Peter interrupted her, his voice getting louder. "Listen here, young lady. I wasn't born yesterday. I know very well that you don't have any visits scheduled. This is a luxury property, not a playground for you and your little friends to play pretend." Emily felt tears of frustration forming in her eyes. She had never been treated like this before, with so much disdain and distrust. "But it's true. My father." "Your father," Peter scoffed. "Let me guess, he's a famous basketball player. Or maybe a rapper? Look, I don't care who you say your father is. You don't belong here and you need to leave now before I call the police." Peter's words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She knew exactly why he was making these assumptions about her father, and the unfairness of it made her feel sick. At this moment, Mark entered the house, still holding his phone. He stopped abruptly when he saw the scene before him, his daughter, with tears in her eyes, staring at a man who looked like he was about to kick her out. "What's going on here?" Mark asked, his voice calm but with an underlying note of steel. Peter turned to Mark, his face a mask of irritation. "Ah, you must be the father," he said, making quotation marks with his fingers. "Look, I don't know what kind of joke you guys are trying to pull here, but I need you to leave immediately." Mark stepped forward, placing himself between Peter and Emily. "My name is Mark Johnson," he said, his voice firm. "I have an appointment to see this house at 2 p.m. I spoke to your secretary Sandra yesterday afternoon to confirm." Peter blinked, clearly surprised. He looked from Mark to Emily and back again, confusion evident on his face. Are you Mark Johnson?" Mark nodded, his eyes never leaving Peter's. "Yes, it's me. And this is my daughter, Emily. Now, could you please explain why you were yelling at her?" Peter paled visibly. He opened and closed his mouth several times, like a fish out of water, before finally finding his voice. "I apologize. There was a misunderstanding. I didn't know." Didn't know what? Mark interrupted him, his voice dangerously calm. "I didn't know that people like us could be interested in a property like this? Or maybe I didn't know that people like us could afford a house like this." Peter stuttered, clearly uncomfortable. "No, it's not that. I thought." "You thought wrong," Mark said firmly. "Now, if you don't mind, I would like to see the house I came for. Unless, of course, you have any objections." Peter shook his head quickly. No, of course not. Please follow me. I will show you around the property." As Peter turned to lead the way, Mark turned to Emily. "Are you okay, sweetie?" he asked softly. Emily nodded, wiping away a stubborn tear. "I'm fine, Dad. I just didn't expect that." Mark hugged his daughter, his heart heavy. He had hoped to protect her from this kind of prejudice for longer, but he knew it was inevitable. "I know, honey. Unfortunately, some people still judge others by the color of their skin. But don't let that get you down. You're strong, smart, and have as much right to be here as anyone else." Emily smiled weakly at her father. "Thanks, Dad. I know." Mark kissed his daughter on the forehead and then turned to follow Peter. As they walked through the luxurious home, Mark kept one eye on Peter and one on Emily. He could see that his daughter was trying to pull herself together, but the incident had clearly shaken her. Peter, for his part, seemed to be doing his best to make up for his initial mistake. He spoke quickly about the details of the house, pointing out special features and impressive views. But Mark could see the nervousness in her eyes, the sweat on her forehead. As he watched Peter try hard to impress them, Mark thought about what to do next. He knew he had the power to end this man's career with a single word. But would this be the right thing to do, or was there a better way to handle this situation, one that could lead to real change? Mark glanced at Emily, who was admiring the ocean view from the master bedroom. He saw the strength in her eyes, the determination in her lifted chin, and in that moment he knew exactly what he needed to do. Mark and Emily entered the huge house, following Peter. Emily was still upset about what had happened outside, but she was trying not to show it. She wanted to be strong like her father. The house was beautiful inside. It had large windows that showed the blue sea outside. Emily had never seen such a beautiful house before. "This is the living room," said Peter, the man who was showing the house. He spoke in a strange way, as if he didn't want Mark and Emily to be there. Mark looked around, admiring the view. "It's really impressive," he said. "What do you think, Emily?" Emily wanted to say that she loved the house, but she was still hurt by the way Peter had spoken to her earlier. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Peter looked at Emily and then at Mark. He looked confused and a little irritated. "Well, this house is very expensive," he said. "I'm sure it's more than you can afford." Mark raised an eyebrow. "And why do you think that, Mr. Collins?" Peter blushed. He opened and closed his mouth a few times before speaking. "Well, this is a very exclusive area. The houses here cost millions of dollars." Emily saw her father become serious. She knew he didn't like it when people judged them just because of the color of their skin. "I understand," Mark said calmly. "Well, why don't we continue the tour? I'd like to see the rest of the house." Peter looked surprised but agreed. He led them into the kitchen, which was large and bright, with marble counters and modern appliances. "This kitchen is perfect for preparing fancy dinners," Peter said, looking at Mark strangely, "although I don't know if you guys are used to this sort of thing." Emily felt her face heat up with anger. She wanted to scream at Peter, tell him that her father was an important man and that they could buy any house they wanted. But she remembered what her father always said: "Don't let anger control you. Show them you're better." Mark, on the other hand, remained calm. He looked at Peter with a polite smile. "Actually, Mr. Collins, we love cooking. Emily here is a little chef." Emily smiled, remembering the time she and her father would make pancakes together on Sunday mornings. Peter looked uncomfortable with Mark's response. He took them upstairs, showing them the bedrooms and bathrooms. In each room he made comments that seemed kind but were actually mean. "This master bedroom has a huge closet," he said when they reached the largest bedroom. although I suppose you guys don't have that many clothes to fill a closet like that." Emily saw her father press his lips together, but he didn't say anything. She didn't understand why he didn't fight with Peter, why he didn't tell him they were wrong about them. When they reached the pool area, Peter made the comment that almost made Emily lose her temper. "This pool is great for fancy parties," he said, looking directly at Mark. "But of course we have rules about the kind of events that can happen here. Do you know what I mean?" Emily opened her mouth to respond, but Mark placed a hand on her shoulder, silently asking her to calm down. He looked at Peter with a polite smile, but his eyes were serious. "I understand completely," Mark said. "I'm sure we will respect all the rules of the neighborhood if we decide to buy the house." Emily couldn't take it anymore. She tugged at her father's shirt sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "why don't you tell him who you are? Why do you let him talk to us like that?" Mark bent down to be at eye level with Emily. "Sometimes, darling, it's important to see how people act when they think they might treat you badly. It shows their true character." Emily frowned, trying to understand. She looked at Peter, who was pretending not to hear their conversation. The tour continued, with Peter making more nasty comments disguised as compliments. Emily could see that her father was getting more and more serious, but he still didn't say anything. Finally, they returned to the living room. Peter looked relieved, probably thinking that Mark and Emily would leave and never come back. "Well, this was our tour," Peter said, his tone showing that he thought he had won. "I'm sure it was interesting for you to see what a house on this level looks like. If you want, I can show you some more suitable options in other neighborhoods." It was at that moment that Mark decided it was time to reveal the truth. He looked at Emily and blinked, a small smile forming on his lips. Emily, even though she didn't fully understand what was about to happen, felt a surge of excitement. Mark turned to Peter, his face serious. "Actually, Mr. Collins, I think this house will be perfect for us. I'm going to buy it." Peter went pale, his mouth falling open in shock. "See, buy? But you understand that this house costs." Mark interrupted him, his voice firm. "I completely understand the price, Mr. Collins. And as I said before, that's not a problem. What is a problem, however, is the way you treated us from the moment we got here." Peter started to stutter, but Mark continued. "You assumed my daughter was an intruder simply because of the color of her skin. You treated us with contempt and prejudice throughout our visit, clearly doubting we could afford this house." Emily watched the scene with wide eyes, finally understanding why her father had remained so calm. He was waiting for the right moment to confront Peter. "But you made a very serious mistake, Mr. Collins," Mark continued. "Not just judging us by our appearance, but also assuming he knew who I was." Mark took a business card out of his pocket and handed it to Peter, who took it with shaking hands. "My name is Mark Johnson, CEO of TechVision Enterprises. And coincidentally, I recently acquired the brokerage firm you work for." Peter's face turned white as paper. He looked from the card to Mark, his mouth opening and closing without making a sound. "I kept this acquisition secret precisely for situations like this," Mark explained, his voice calm but firm. "I wanted to see how our employees treated customers, especially those who might be targets of bias." Peter started to sputter apologies, but Mark held up his hand, silencing him. "Mr. Collins, the behavior you demonstrated today is completely unacceptable. Not just as a professional, but as a human being. Discrimination and prejudice have no place in our company or anywhere in society." Mark turned to Emily, who was watching everything with a mixture of pride and admiration. "Emily, honey, what do you think we should do about this?" Emily thought for a moment, looking from her father to Peter, who looked like he was about to pass out. "I think he should lose his job, Dad," she said finally. "People like that shouldn't work with other people." Mark nodded, turning to Peter. "I agree, Mr. Collins, you are dismissed, effective immediately. Please leave your keys and badge at the front desk on your way out." Peter, still in shock, began to beg. "Please, Mr. Johnson, give me another chance. I can change, I swear." But Mark was adamant. "No, Mr. Collins. You had many chances today to treat me and my daughter with respect and dignity. You chose not to. Now you must face the consequences of your actions." Emily watched as Peter, his shoulders slumped and his face flushed with embarrassment, walked out of the house. She turned to her father, her eyes shining with admiration. "Dad, you were amazing," she exclaimed. "Did you know all along who he was and what he was going to do?" Mark smiled, hugging his daughter. "Not exactly, dear. I expected him to treat us with respect, regardless of who we were. Unfortunately, he showed his true character." Emily frowned thoughtfully. "But Dad, why are some people like this? Why do they judge others just by the color of their skin?" Mark sighed, sitting down on the couch and pulling Emily to sit next to him. "It's a hard question, honey. Some people are afraid of what's different. Others learn prejudices from their families or society. But that doesn't make it right." "What can we do about this?" Emily asked, her voice full of concern. Mark smiled gently. "We can do a lot of things, Emily. We can educate people, show them that skin color doesn't define who we are. We can be kind and respectful to everyone no matter what they look like. And we can speak up when we see injustice like we did today." Emily nodded, taking in her father's words. "I want to do this, Dad. I want to help change things." Mark kissed the top of his daughter's head. "I know you will, sweetie. You're already doing that, being who you are." They sat there for a moment, looking out the window at the ocean. Emily felt sad about what had happened, but also hopeful. She knew that with people like her father in the world, things could change for the better. "So what do you think?" Mark finally asked. "Should we buy this house?" Emily looked around, remembering all of Peter's mean comments. Then she smiled. "Yes, Dad. Let's buy it, and let's make it a place full of love and respect." Mark laughed, hugging his daughter again. "That's right, honey. Let's show everyone that this house and this neighborhood is for everyone who can afford it, no matter the color of their skin." As they left the house, Emily felt stronger and more determined than ever. She knew the world wouldn't always be fair, but she also knew that with courage and love, she and her father could make a difference. Mark and Emily decided to keep looking at the house even after Peter left. They wanted to see everything calmly, without anyone saying bad things to them. "Shall we see the rooms again?" Emily asked, holding her father's hand. Mark smiled. "Of course, honey. Let's imagine what it would be like to live here." They walked up the stairs slowly. Emily ran her hand over the shiny banister. It was smooth and cold. She imagined what it would be like to run down those stairs every morning. The first room they saw was large and bright. It had a huge window that showed the sea outside. Emily ran to the window and stared at the waves. "Look, Dad. You can see the surfers," she shouted excitedly. Mark joined her at the window. He placed his hand on Emily's shoulder. "It's a beautiful view, isn't it? Imagine waking up and seeing this every day." Emily was quiet for a moment. She was thinking about something. "Dad," she said softly, "do you think people here will treat us like Peter did?" Mark knelt down to be at Emily's height. He looked into her eyes. "Honey, some people may be like Peter, but many others will treat us well. The important thing is that we don't let bad people make us feel like we don't deserve to be here." Emily nodded, but still looked worried. "What if the other boys and girls don't want to play with me?" Mark hugged his daughter. "Emily, you're an amazing girl. Anyone who doesn't want to be your friend is missing out on something very special. But I'm sure you'll make lots of friends here." They continued walking around the house. Emily imagined where she would put her toys, where she would do her homework. She even chose a perfect corner to read her favorite books. When they arrived in the kitchen, Emily was amazed. It was big and bright, with lots of closets and an island in the middle. "We can make a lot of cakes here," she said, running her fingers across the marble counter. Mark laughed. "Yes, we can. How about we make pancakes every Sunday?" Emily jumped for joy. "Yes, and we can invite Grandma and Grandpa to come eat with us." Emily's happiness made Mark smile. But he also kept thinking, would the neighbors welcome them? Would Emily be happy here? They went to the backyard. It had a large pool and a beautiful garden. Emily ran across the grass, laughing. Mark watched her, his heart full of love. "Dad," Emily shouted. "Look, there's a swing here." Mark went to where Emily was. There was a swing hanging from a big tree. Emily was already sitting on it. "Push me, Dad," she asked. Mark began to push the swing slowly. Emily laughed every time she went up. The sound of her laughter filled the air. As he pushed the swing, Mark thought about everything that had happened that day. He felt sad about the way Peter treated them. But he also felt proud for having faced prejudice. "Emily," he called, "do you remember what happened with Peter today?" Emily stopped laughing. She held the swing ropes tightly. "Yes, Dad. He was really mean to us." Mark stopped the swing. He knelt down in front of Emily. "It's true. He was very unfair. But you know what's important to remember." Emily shook her head, waiting for her father to continue. "It's important to remember that what he did is wrong. No matter the color of our skin, we all deserve respect. And when someone treats us badly because of our color, we can't stay quiet." Emily thought for a moment. "Like you did, right, Dad? You didn't keep quiet. You told Peter he was wrong." Mark smiled proudly. "Exactly. And you can do that too. If someone treats you badly or treats someone else badly, you can speak up. You can say that it's not right." Emily nodded seriously. "I'm going to do it, Dad. I'm going to stand up for people who are treated badly." Mark hugged his daughter tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Emily. You're a strong and brave girl." They stayed on the swing for a while longer. Emily started laughing and playing again. Mark watched her, thinking about how his daughter was growing up and learning important things. As the sun began to set, they decided it was time to leave. As they walked back to the house, Emily held her father's hand. "Dad," she said, "I want to live here, even if some people are bad like Peter. Because we can show them they're wrong." Mark felt his heart fill with pride and love. "You're right, sweetheart. We can make a difference here. We can show that a family like ours belongs wherever we choose." They stopped at the front door. Mark looked at the big house, thinking about all the memories they could create there. "So what do you think?" he asked Emily. "Should we buy this house?" Emily looked at the house, then at her father. His eyes sparkled with excitement. "Yes. Let's buy it, Dad. It'll be our special home." Mark laughed and hugged Emily. "Then it's decided. This will be our new home." As they left the grounds, Mark thought about everything they had been through that day. It had been difficult, but also important. He knew there would be more challenges ahead. But looking at Emily, so brave and full of hope, he knew they could face anything together. "You know what?" Emily Mark said as they got into the car. "What, Dad?" Emily asked, putting on her seatbelt. "I think we're going to be very happy here. And who knows, we might even help other people understand that everyone deserves to be treated with respect." Emily smiled, her eyes shining. "Yes, Dad. Let's do this together." Mark and Emily returned home after viewing the Malibu house. Emily was very excited. She couldn't stop talking about all the cool things she had seen. "Dad, have you seen that huge pool and the swing in the backyard? It's going to be so fun to live there," Emily said, jumping into the car seat. Mark smiled, happy to see his daughter so excited. But he was also worried. He knew moving to a new neighborhood wouldn't be easy, especially after what happened to Peter. When they got home, Sarah, Emily's mother, was waiting for them. She hugged Emily and gave Mark a kiss. "So? How was it?" Sarah asked. Emily started to tell her mother everything. She talked about the big house, the view of the sea, and the swing in the backyard. But when she got to the part about Peter, her voice became sad. "Mommy, there was a man there who was really mean to us," Emily said softly. Sarah looked at Mark worriedly. Mark sighed and told Sarah everything that had happened with Peter. "He treated us very badly," Sarah Mark said. "He thought we couldn't buy the house just because we're black." Sarah was very angry when she heard this. "How could he do this? This is so wrong." Mark agreed. "Yes, it's wrong. But you know what's important? We didn't let him make us feel bad. In fact, I fired him. Sarah was surprised. You fired him? How? Mark explained that he was the new owner of the company where Peter worked. Sarah was proud of how Mark had handled the situation. You did the right thing, darling, she said. People like that shouldn't work with other people. Emily, who was listening to the conversation, said, Dad, do you think there will be more people like Peter in our new neighborhood? Mark and Sarah looked at each other. They knew this was a difficult question. Emily, dear, Mark began, unfortunately that may be so. Some people still judge others by the color of their skin. But you know what? Many other people are good and kind. Sarah knelt down in front of Emily. The important thing is that we know who we are. We are a strong, loving family. It doesn't matter what other people think or say. Emily thought for a moment. So, are we still moving there? Mark smiled. Yes, let's go. Because that house is perfect for us, and we have as much right to live there as anyone else. Emily smiled back. Great, because I was already thinking about how I'm going to decorate my new room. Everyone laughed, and the atmosphere became lighter. Over the next few weeks, the Johnson family prepared for the move. They packed up their things, bought new furniture, and said goodbye to their neighbors. Emily was excited, but also a little nervous. She was going to have to change schools and make new friends. The night before the move, she couldn't sleep. Mark found Emily sitting on the bed, hugging her favorite teddy bear. Hey, princess, what's wrong? He asked, sitting down next to her. What if the other kids don't like me? Emily asked softly. Mark hugged his daughter. Emily, you're an amazing girl. You're smart, funny, and kind. I'm sure you'll make lots of friends. But what if they're like Peter? Emily insisted. Mark thought for a moment. You know, Emily, not everyone is going to be our friend. And some people can be mean like Peter. But you know what's important? It's important to be yourself, to be kind to everyone, and to stay close to the people who treat you good. Emily nodded, looking a little calmer. And remember, Mark continued, you can always count on me and Mom. We're here for you, no matter what. Emily hugged her father tightly. Thank you, Dad. I love you. I love you too, Princess, Mark replied, kissing the top of Emily's head. The next day, the Johnson family moved into their new home in Malibu. When they arrived, they saw a group of people waiting for them in front of the house. Emily was nervous. Dad, who are these people? Mark was also a little worried, but he tried not to show it. I don't know, honey. Let's find out. They got out of the car, and a woman approached them with a big smile. Hello, you must be the Johnsons. Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm Susan. I live next door. Mark and Sarah were surprised by the warm welcome. They introduced themselves, and Susan began to introduce the other neighbors. There were families of all colors and sizes. Children ran across the lawn laughing and playing. Emily looked at her parents, her eyes shining with excitement. Look, Dad. There are a lot of kids here, she said. A girl about Emily's age approached. Hi, I'm Lily. Want to play with me? Emily looked at her parents, who smiled and nodded. Yes, I want it, she replied, running to join the other children. While Emily played, Mark and Sarah chatted with the neighbors. They were happy to discover that many families in the neighborhood were of different races and cultures. We really value diversity here, Susan explained. We believe this makes our community richer and more interesting. Mark felt enormous relief. He looked at Sarah and saw that she was smiling too. You know, Mark said, we had a bad experience when we first came to see the house. The realtor treated us really badly because of the color of our skin. Neighbors were shocked to hear this. This is terrible, Susan exclaimed. I hope you know we don't tolerate that kind of behavior here. Another neighbor, a man named David, said this is why it's so important to have a diverse community. It helps combat prejudice and teaches our children to respect all people. Mark and Sarah felt very welcome. They realized they had made the right choice by moving there. Meanwhile, Emily was having so much fun with the other kids. She played tag, laughed, and made new friends. She didn't even remember being nervous before. At the end of the day, when all the neighbors were gone, the Johnson family entered their new home. They were tired but happy. "So what?" Mark asked Emily. "What did you think of our first day here?" Emily gave a big smile. "It was the best day ever, Dad. I made a bunch of new friends, and Lily invited me to play at her house tomorrow." Sarah laughed. "Looks like someone is already making themselves at home." Mark hugged his family. "You know, I think we're all feeling at home." That night, while Emily slept in her new room, Mark and Sarah talked in the living room. "Did you see how happy she was?" Sarah said. "I think we did the right thing moving here." Mark agreed. "Yes, we did. And you know what? I think we can do more than just live here. We can help make this place even better." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "Well, we could organize events to celebrate the neighborhood's diversity, or give talks at schools about respect and equality. We could use our experience to help other people." Sarah smiled, proud of her husband. "That's a great idea, Mark. I'm sure Emily will want to help too." In the months that followed, the Johnson family became an important part of the community. Mark organized a cultural festival in the neighborhood, where families could share food, music, and traditions from their origins. Emily, with the help of her new friends, created a club at school called Friends of All Colors. They made posters about equality and respect, and organized games that celebrated the differences between people. Sarah started giving cooking classes to her neighbors, teaching recipes from different countries. This helped unite the community even more. One day, while the family was having dinner, Emily said something that made Mark and Sarah very proud. "You know, Mom and Dad, I'm glad we moved here," she said. "Even though that bad man was mean to us in the beginning." "Why, darling?" Sarah asked. Emily thought for a moment before responding. "Because now we can show people that being different is cool. And we can help other people who are treated badly just because they are different." Mark smiled, with tears in his eyes. "You're right, Emily. And you know what? I'm so proud of you." Emily smiled back. "I'm proud of you too, Mom and Dad. You're the best parents in the world." The family hugged each other, happy and grateful to be together and to have found a place where they could be themselves. That night, before going to sleep, Mark looked out the window at the quiet neighborhood. He thought about everything they had gone through to get there. It had been difficult at times, but it was worth it. He knew that the world would not always be fair, that there would still be people like Peter out there. But he also knew that with love, courage, and determination, they could make a difference. One day at a time, one person at a time, they would help build a better world. A world where everyone, no matter the color of their skin, could feel at home.